There was nobody online able to hear anything up to.
No, you might have to start over.
Could be at people online. No votes.
So I need to, hold on.
For your information, this is all like every city meeting, public meeting in Petoskey. It's recorded.
Oh.
It'll be on the city website. Every board meeting is on there. City council, along with the agenda, along with the video of the past meetings. You can go back as far as you need to. So just to let you know, if you missed something here and you want to hear it again, that's an option.
Good job, Sarah. Thanks, Sarah. Good job.
Good job, everybody.
You're doing great.
Okay, so.
Always.
It's being recorded, it's live stream. And. Are you gonna start over?
You don't need to start over, do you?
I mean, no one could hear, so I think you should.
Okay,
There's only a couple
okay,
slides.
start over.
Let me just.
We will be starting this over. We'll do a speed through to get up to where we were so that people online have not been able to hear what was said, so. Rory, are you ready?
So I need to share this.
It's close.
Okay.
And if you wanna just hit, you can just hit. this. And it might be delayed because it's so big, I think.
All right. Are we all set?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone. And thanks for bearing with us online. We had some technical difficulties and I hope everybody can hear me now clear in the audience as well as online. So just to back up a couple slides here, the agenda, I'm just going to give a recap of kind of a high level overview of the work we've done. We presented to City Council almost a year ago to the day. So it was October 21st last year that we were here to present our 50% design. So since then, we've gone through and advanced that design such that it's ready to permit, as well as we've developed all the final design documents. So those are bid documents that include plans, specs, and a basis of design report that kind of summarizes all the analysis and the project kind of from point A to point Z. So it's a high level overview of everything as well as the information that we acquired throughout the project. I had mentioned this previously though, so financial assistance was provided for this project in part by Eagle. So we just want to give them a shout out with this presentation as well. Just a bit of background here. So this really is focusing on the Little Traverse Wheelway, the 26-mile regional trail that extends from Harbor Springs to Charlevoix. So the portion of this trailway here, which I'm sure you're all well aware of if you're here, is the Miracle Mile, which has been shut down since 2020. Originally constructed in 2009, it was essentially a rail to trail conversion. So essentially paving atop the existing rail bed without the addition of shoreline protection throughout the portion of that project. Just a quick recap. So come 2020, record high lake levels on the Great Lakes. You started to experience all kinds of erosion along the toe as the lake levels went up and waves were able to essentially scarp away at the sandy slopes of the existing bluff there and ultimately causing different types of failures throughout that Miracle Mile stretch. And I'm sure you guys are well aware of those. You had the major coastal bluff collapse, which washed out approximately 150 to 200 feet of trailway in an abrupt failure. And then you also have a lot of smaller, shallow, we call them superficial failures that are essentially worsening over time. And essentially it led to the closure of the trailway for public safety. Since then, we've looked at a handful of different options through previous conceptual studies, and then ultimately the city was able to acquire an Eagle grant in 2023. So what I'm presenting on today is the work we've done under that Eagle grant. So between 2023 and where we are now. And with that, the images you see here just kind of highlight the different options we looked at, from moving the trailway up to the top of the bluff to building a more traditional stone revetment, and also looking at a dynamic revetment. And ultimately, the city made the decision to look at the dynamic revetment in more detail for this particular aspect of the study. So that's the solution that we've assessed and carried through the final design. So this is just a high level overview of the plan and some renderings that were presented a year ago. Essentially, as I mentioned, we were here for the 50% design. So just to highlight and touch base on the overall objectives of the project, it was really about protecting the shoreline and the bluff to do three different things. One is to reestablish this section of trailway. The other main goal there would be to protect critical infrastructure. So that would be looking at potential impacts to Highway 31, any kind of utilities in the vicinity of the project area, and then also just looking at how we protect public and private property improvements, so buildings and landscapes and such along this trailway. So the trailway is unique in that it runs on an easement. It goes through a handful of different properties. As many of you likely know, there's city property, there's county property, then atop the bluff, you have Highway 31, which is under MDOT's jurisdiction, and then you have a handful of private properties throughout the stretch of trailway as well. So this is a high-level overview of what was presented previously. From this, the design didn't change significantly. It was more about how to refine this design and look at taking it from 50% to 100%. So it wasn't after we presented this that we were going to look at all brand new concepts, but really how do we refine this design and turn it into a final design. So as just a high level overview on our various deliverables here. So there's bid documents. So those are the plans and specs that would go out to the street. You get issued, say if this project was approved for construction, it would be what contractors would bid on. And then we put together the detailed design report, which I think the city has a link to the initial revision of that report on their website as well. But that report highlights everything from the existing conditions, the field investigations we completed, which included soil borings, installing groundwater monitoring devices, surveys of the site, as well as the lake bed. So a handful of not necessarily standard procedures, but in-depth field investigations that went into this to look at both the coastal aspects of the site as well as the geotechnical aspects. So the subsurface conditions as well as the coastal conditions. So essentially, the goal here is to develop our basis of design and then go through the process of refining that design through the design development. We looked at construction logistics along the way, knowing that this is a challenging site and that it's a relatively confined site along the shoreline from an access perspective. It's a rather large bluff, and it's just getting to the site from the water side is challenging based on the relatively shallow depths offshore with the kind of material we're bringing in. So we looked at all kinds of different things. We can essentially put on our contractor hat and thought about how this thing could get built. And then the OPCC is our opinion of probable construction costs. So that's essentially going through the process and again, thinking about it like a contractor and understanding doing detailed volume calculations on the final designs that we put together, looking at material sourcing and logistics. So that image on the lower left you see there, that's from a quarry visit that we did, quarry in Thessalon, Ontario. So it's essentially looking at the type of stone that we would use for the dynamic revetment feature that I'll talk about as I walk through the plans here. So essentially like 4 to 8 inch natural cobblestone there. And then the other two images there just show some of the various things that we had to go through. So we did a detailed coastal analysis here, and it involved coastal modeling to look at how we define the parameters and essentially size the cobble beach. So there was a lot that went into that in terms of different coastal numerical modeling, using different different software as well as published guidance with respect to something we call wave overtopping. So essentially designing it so that we can limit the amount of water that goes over the structure to a certain threshold that has less likelihood to erode near shore slopes. And then we did all kinds of different geotechnical analysis with respect to slope stability modeling, looking at the existing conditions and proposed conditions. So this is just kind of a high level snapshot of some of the stuff we looked at here. So looking at multiple profiles throughout the site, trying to understand how we can be as efficient as possible with our design to essentially keep construction costs as low as we could go for the design we were trying to achieve. So some of the performance criteria that we used. So essentially what we did was going through this process, we worked with the city to define the goals and then as well as the different elements to achieve those goals. And then we looked at different performance criteria for how we go about the whole process and the analysis for essentially sizing these structures and going through and looking at how to reshape the site so that it is stable and usable and functional and safe for the long term. So for the shoreline, it's really about protecting the toe or the bottom of the bluff. And I had mentioned overtopping. So as waves breach over structures, one thing we look at is the volume of water that can come over a structure. And we looked at different lake levels in our modeling. So we used a 100-year lake level and then a 25-year wave. So there's a lot of different analysis that goes into that to define those in terms of both empirical analysis as well as numerical modeling. So essentially we use that information to size the coastal structure that we built, so they're designed so the dynamic revetment along the toe of the shoreline or the toe of the bluff here. And then the bluff, we looked at different, what we call a factor of safety. So essentially a factor of safety is a number that you try to achieve to create a stable condition. So there's published guidance with respect to factors of safety by MDOT and the Army Corps for slopes. So we looked at essentially if you have a factor of safety of 1, you're in a condition where a bluff can fail. So we looked at both short-term condition targets as well as long-term and matched those with MDOT and Army Corps guidance as well. And then the trailway itself, we just thought about universal access, user safety. AASHTO, the trailway guidelines were one of the key elements there that we use for design performance criteria for the trailway as well. So what you see in the back here is the overall proposed conditions. There's a handful of different sheets that go along with this. So what I'm going to walk through here is the blow-ups from the western side of the site to the eastern side of the site and just give a high-level overview of what you see here. I know these are engineered drawings, construction drawings, so to people that don't look at those all day, it is often kind of confusing as to what you're looking at. So I just want to take a minute to walk through some of that so folks understand what it is we're proposing along the shoreline here. So with this image, what you see here, the top picture here, so this is the far western end of the site. There's an existing cul-de-sac at the end of Arrowhead Drive. So that's what you see. I don't know if there's a pointer, if you guys can see.
On the screen.
It doesn't? Okay. So essentially the plan view on the top image, on the left-hand side there, the gray masses you see along the bottom, that shows the cobble beach. And then from that, we're grading up. So we're regrading that area so that it's a shallower slope that's less likely to erode in that sense, or it's currently oversteepened. So we're regrading as well as revegetating that slope. There is a steel sheet pile wall. So that's a vertical wall, a vertical retaining wall along the edge of the trailway for a portion of it that exists currently. We're maintaining that wall and we're actually proposing to extend it for a portion of this. And the purpose of that, which I'll show in the next slide here, these are typical sections through that area. And you can see that vertical element along the trailway. By putting a vertical wall in there, it allows us to essentially drop the grade down and grade out at a shallower slope without having to push too far into the lake. Essentially, with shoreline improvement projects like this, it's always a balance about how much lake bed you can impact in order to make a project feasible from a regulatory perspective. So that's one thing we keep in mind there. And then it also allows for less modification and movement of both balancing cut and fill. So the idea with our design here, or the intent, is that we're not bringing in a whole bunch of additional general fill to the site, but we're reshaping the area to essentially achieve a shallower slope that we can vegetate. And doing so by grading and moving soil around on the site. There would be topsoil that would be brought in to essentially revegetate the area, but then down below that, the large mass you see is the dynamic revetment. So it's a 4 to 8 inch stone. That's a rather large feature. It's a 30-foot crest along the top, and then it slopes down to the lake at a 6-to-1 slope. So these are general typical sections through that first area there, and you can, it's probably tough to see from here, but there's section markers in the upper right that show where these sections are cut. As you move down the site here, this is there's essentially 2 reaches for the project. There's an eastern reach and a western reach. So this is the western portion of the eastern reach, and what you see here is just the further extents of the cobble beach, some regrading. One thing that's unique in this area is that behind the trailway as it currently exists, there's a large deep swale. So what we're proposing here is to essentially push the trailway back further to the bluff to fill that swale, as well as acquire additional fill material or cut from that we can use elsewhere in this reach of shoreline in this whole rebalancing or regrading effort. And it essentially makes it so we don't have to truck in a whole lot of additional general fill for this regrading process. And these are 2 sections through that area that I just showed. The section on top, there's a large mass that you can see that essentially is the cut. So that would be the existing trailway, and then there's a depression behind that. So we're essentially pushing that crest further inland and cutting that. And then there's also additional stormwater infrastructure. So the trailway has been designed such that it has a storm sewer associated with it. So any kind of surface runoff and drain or precipitation on the trailway is collected into this, as opposed to just saturating into the existing soils or being problematic from an erosion perspective on that lower slope. So stormwater management was another key aspect of our design. The section on the bottom just shows how the beach starts to taper out and tie into the existing as we come to the end of this, we'll call it the western reach. This area here is what you're looking at is where the existing coastal collapse took place in 2020. So what we're doing to address that is a combination of regrading. There's actually a bridge structure that is built to span where that trailway washed out. Above that, we're using an engineered solution called soil nailing. So that would be drilling anchors into the actual soil to hold a wire mesh that can essentially be vegetated over. So regrading up from the top down to where that failure currently extends wasn't feasible based on the spatial parameters. If you took essentially our stable slope is a 2-to-1 slope, and that doesn't require any kind of additional, what we would call geogrid or an engineered type solution that we would have to excavate further in. So to push that 2-to-1 slope up to the crest there, it just pushes everything further out into the lakes. We use this soil nailing solution in the upper area there. Again, through this part, there was another swale that we had pushed back and essentially acquired fill there to essentially balance cut and fill through this whole regrading process along here. But the goal was to essentially shallow up and repair any of these ongoing sloughing failures, as well as the coastal collapse. Build a bridge over that, repair that existing block wall that is on the western side of where that coastal bluff collapse took place, and essentially bring the trailway back through that area over the bridge and to connect up with the other reach that we had shown in the previous plan. Along the beach here is a dynamic revetment, so a cobble beach along the toe here again. One thing we have included here was a gravel path that goes from the trailway down at a 12% slope to the beach for future maintenance purposes. So that's just, down the road, if there's any reason to get heavy equipment down there, there's now an access path to do so. The profile you see in the bottom is essentially a profile along the center line of the trailway. So there's the proposed line as well as the existing line, which is dashed. It's probably tough to see from here on this screen, but essentially this is just walking through and showing what the existing conditions look like versus the proposed under the trailway alignment. Here's a couple sections through that area. The section on top shows the block wall that is currently there. So we would do some fill up against that and carry some of the stormwater infrastructure that currently exists there to the back of the beach, and then build that cobble beach out in front of that grading. The section on the bottom there that you see is essentially going through that bridge area. So you can see the bridge kind of floating there in that section, but underneath that is some regrading and revegetating. And then above that, the gray mass that you see with the perpendicular lines through it, that's the soil nailing portion there. This last plan just shows how this cobble beach feature extends further down the beach here. Essentially, there's shallower water out front the further east you go. So the crest of the cobble beach structure lowers through this area. There's less issues and impacts on the trailway and lower slope through this area that we found through our investigations. And so essentially it seemed more beneficial to be less impactful in this particular area where it's not currently sloughing, but focus on protecting the toe with a beach. And then we have essentially designed it so that the trailway would be repaved all the way to Magnus Park, as that would likely be a key construction access route. And then this is just a couple sections through that area. And again, the report that's available on the city's website has the full drawing set in there. So I understand if it's kind of tough to walk through this in a meeting like this and get a full understanding of what I'm trying to show and what the drawings depict, but hopefully this helps if you're looking to understand it further and you want to pick through those drawings in that report. But that section on top there, it just shows the mass that would be removed to regrade it and some of the fill area behind there, as well as the cobble beach down below. And that particular section is cut through some stormwater infrastructure to show how that's conveyed from the trailway and under and through the regrading to the back of the cobble beach feature. And then the section on the bottom just shows the area where we're not seeing as much issues with respect to nearshore erosion on that lower trailway, but we are proposing to put the cobble beach through there to essentially protect that toe. So just a bit about approvals, fundings, and next steps. So as I mentioned, the trailway is currently on an easement that the city has an easement where the trailway lies through multiple properties. So there's a handful of different property owners that I'd mentioned, from private to city, county. There's also different stakeholders at play, including MDOT. So a lot of different decision-making with folks that we've talked throughout the portion of the project. So I don't want people to think that we're just throwing this at those different folks blindly, because we have had a handful of meetings throughout this process to essentially vet these designs and get feedback along the way. There's also regulatory approvals that would be required for any kind of construction of this nature. So we've gone through and developed all of the permitting narrative as well as the permitting applications. However, they're currently on hold, and a lot of that has to do with the funding aspects. So the cost estimate that we developed, what we call an opinion of probable construction costs, is currently at 19.8 million. So just right around 20 million. 13 million of that is the dynamic revetment. So there's a lot of stone. It's almost 90,000 tons of stone that would be involved with that creation of that particular feature. The logistics of getting that to site and placing it are expensive. So essentially, that's, I guess the story there with respect to the 20 million is that a good portion of that 20 million has to do with that shoreline protection. And it's not to say that the other works aren't are free or anything to that nature. There's still a good chunk of the 20 million that is required for the shoreline or the upland work with respect to grading, revegetating the site, bringing bridges in, the stormwater infrastructure and the like. Just a thing to note on how we develop that estimate. So we go through and we build everything in 3D. So we get all of the volumes and materials, and then we essentially think about this like a contractor. So we look at different equipment rates, crew rates, build this up and kind of go through a logistics scenario of how long it would take to place materials, where the material is coming from, and essentially think about it and go through it as a contractor. And put all the various markups that they would typically put on things for overhead, and apply contingencies as appropriate, as well as escalating the project to a future construction date. We do provide a high-level summary of some additional or potential grant opportunities for work of this nature. Actually, acquiring grants for construction was not part of our scope of work for this project, but we do provide some information and background on potential opportunities there in our basis of design report. So essentially the next steps for us, this is us presenting our 100% design. We've submitted the basis of design report that has the background as to how we developed that design. We understand these construction costs are that it is a lot of money to make this project go forward, and as I mentioned, that 13 million that is associated with the dynamic revetment. There is different things to do in terms of value engineering, just looking at in terms of risk tolerance. If you are more, I guess, reduce that criteria in terms of your design conditions and essentially accept more risk, there's ways to reduce the amount of volume and that shoreline protection. There's also often with coastal engineering projects, we'll build projects in what we call a physical model. So essentially all of the design is based on numerical modeling now, and which is all essentially desktop or computer-based modeling, as well as empirical formulas and whatnot for developing the design. However, sort of a tried and true method in the coastal world is to build projects up in a physical wave tank. So that's to essentially the wave tank is about the size of a football field, and you build up the bathymetry and look at different ways to try to test different scenarios and make your design more efficient to ultimately reduce, with the hopes that you can reduce construction costs or material volumes associated with those costs. So that's my report or presentation, and I appreciate everybody's time, and I'll turn it back over to you guys.
Sir, we have a few questions for you. Who would like first? Mr. Shields.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll start us off. Thanks, Rory. I appreciate your time being here. Thanks, Kendall and Shane and all city staff for keeping us going for the last few years. Appreciate that. Thanks to everybody in the community. Definitely see your interest in this. So I love the dynamic revetment idea and the goal there. It shows respect to the dynamic system that our Great Lakes shorelines are. As a council member thinking about the financial responsibility we have, it is a balance of sustainability, which I think is a value that we have as a community, versus the financial responsibility we have to use our funds wisely. And there's probably multiple right answers, and I think wisdom is finding a wise answer and going forward this. So I appreciate the mention of, okay, what are some value engineering options? Not that I think financial acceptability, like a financial amount and a sustainability, I don't think they have to be mutually exclusive. Potentially we can do it all. But in the case that that isn't feasible, I think it's prudent on us to look at those other options. So we have the platinum or gold standard. What is the bronze standard, or what is the wooden participation standard, you know? So, I think if we truly prioritize this as something we want to put back in place where it is along the shoreline, along the Magnificent Mile, then we should accept have a higher tolerance for the risk of failure. And especially if we can get that cost down lower, then I would argue for increasing our tolerance for it failing. So that's my comment, and I want to start with that. And Rory, my question, with the modeling, you mentioned a 100-year lake level and a 25-year wave action. That just with climate changes and just the lack of ability to really predict the future and some of the changes that we're seeing on our ocean coastal systems, those numbers seem small. Like with 1,000-year storm events we've been seeing. Am I wrong in saying that I could have concerns that maybe we should look at even longer potential impacts? And then with the modeling you suggested, the wave tank modeling, be able to account for even greater potential impacts. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess if your question is, should we consider even going above and beyond that in terms of the lake levels? So the design lake level that we've used for this is about 584.5-ish. So that's your 100-year lake level, plus it has surge on top of it. So when we look at these return period lake levels, you have your lake level and then what we call a combined, or we call it a still lake level. So essentially we'll put surge on top of that as well. So it's not necessarily just equating to simply like a 100-year event. It also has that storm surge aspect on top of it as well. So we're more conservative in that sense. And then in terms of the wave condition that we put on there, using the 25-year wave condition on top of that event, it's not a direct correlation, but if you looked at that as a combined return period interval, it's more like a 2,500-year event. So essentially we're more conservative than just necessarily looking at it that say we did the 100-year lake level. We do have some write-up and discussion of climate change impacts. There's a lot of ongoing study on that at the federal level in terms of Great Lakes lake level impacts. One thing that's I guess kind of widely adopted, or I don't know if that's the right way to put it, talking about climate change in general these days, it seems like it's just opened up for debate. But what we see as coastal experts is essentially the potential for higher highs and lower lows, but still having that same transition between your seasonal or just the dynamic nature of the Great Lakes, where you go from extended periods of high to extended periods of lows. But in terms of just what a warmer temperature would mean here, would mean that there could potentially be less ice during the stormiest seasons of the year. So say if you didn't have that ice along your shoreline, you could be more exposed to more severe wave action during those windier months of the year. So yeah, I guess in terms of going above and beyond that, I think what we have here essentially does.
Yeah, I hear that. Thank you.
Could I follow up on that question? With the lake level right now, how many feet are we talking of water increasing? I guess people would probably, rather than talking of 25, 30 years, what is the lake basically level right now?
So I want to say it's right around 580-ish right now.
580, and what is this going to be built for what height, depth of water?
So the
584, 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet?
So the crest of this structure is at 589 for the vast majority of it. It gets lower, it drops down 2 feet. So and 584.5 was approximately the design water level that we used for the 100-year combined condition. So, yeah, in terms of, are you curious what that looks like in today versus in the future scenario? So, yeah, I guess the way that it's designed with a 6-to-1 slope too, it's from a visual impact perspective, for every foot of change you have in water level, you lose essentially 6 feet of beach. So as it goes up from say like 580 to 584, and that 584 condition is when you have a storm and surge built up in the bay here. So the calm condition during that 100-year lake level is more like around 582-ish. So, you know, from, I guess, today's lake level, you're looking at, say, like 15 feet of difference in terms of the amount of usable, I guess, just beach dynamic revetment space.
Mr. Moore,
Yeah, I just have a follow-up on that too. I might refer readers to page 31, where you talk about climate change, and basically it says, this is a quote, "There's much uncertainty as to the extent and intensity of these changes. Even short-term changes are difficult to predict. Without proper planning and continuous monitoring, it's also unknown how and when communities along the coast will be impacted and whether current protective measures and structure can withstand disaster scenarios." Also on the same page, I thought it was interesting that you indicated that more definitive information regarding climate change on the Great Lakes will not be available until late 2025, and that the Great Lakes Coastal Resiliency Study will not be completed until 2027. Does that all sound right?
Yep.
So would that information from those studies help to inform your work here?
You know, we would still typically use a hindcast approach method where we look at real data that's been logged in the past and develop our scenarios based upon that, as opposed to trying to predict what it's going to be in the future, but just understanding that maybe you want to, like, typically, I don't want to say typically, but in the past, they would use I don't want to even try to generalize too much here, but there's when people design revetments, say 10 years ago, or even to this day, depending on what your risk tolerance is, some people use what they would call a 2010 or a 10-20 scenario, where you'd use your 10-year water level and your 20-year wave, or your 20-year water level and your 10-year wave. So ultimately going to this 100-year water level and is a more conservative approach and protects you, or, you know, we're looking at the upper, or just a more extreme conservative approach for our shoreline protection.
Mr. Moore.
I'm going to switch gears now and talk about easements. So on page 6 of the report, it indicates that the improvements proposed for this project will require site improvements beyond the current trailway easement boundary. Letters of approval from property owners are required, end of quote. So do the properties listed on page 8 and 9 of the report include the referenced easements that are required beyond current easements, or are those just the ones that have been inquired thus far?
Essentially what we're saying is that if you're going to propose to do this, there's no way you can stabilize this bluff inside of the existing easement that you have. So it requires going beyond that. And in order to get a permit to construct anything on anybody else's property, you would need a letter that says, I'm okay with that. So that's really what that's saying. And
So a prerequisite to this project would be acquiring additional easements to those that we have thus far.
Yeah, I think that would make sense to do that. But if you did have a letter that said, you're okay to do that work and permit that work, I don't think they would require a legal easement for you to do that work. Because essentially, depending, the easement language could be tailored however you want it to be, in a sense, in terms of who maintains that after. You know, if you're going to do, I mean, this is all fictitious scenarios, but if you essentially built something on somebody else's property that's going to benefit your property, but said, okay, I'll pay for the upfront cost, but you have to upkeep it or something, you know, you could define that language however the two parties agree for it to essentially be. It's essentially a contract. So
Sounds like a legal question.
yeah, and easement modification wasn't part of our scope.
So one of the things I wasn't clear on, switching gears again, when I looked at the report was what was the reach of the analysis, including geosyntech and the others, upland of the waterfront regarding groundwater, riverines, stormwater, in terms of impact on the project. When I looked at the boreholes, et cetera, they seem to be more in the vicinity of the project itself. So could you speak to that, please?
Yeah, so the geotechnical analysis focused on collecting data at the top of the bluff and on the trailway in terms of where the borings were sited, and then we used historical data as well. But we put groundwater monitoring instrumentation inside of those borings that were completed for this study, and there was also some that were put in by MDOT previously as well. So we had that information, and we were able to essentially look at topography and precipitation, which we document in the report, and tie that, well, essentially the correlation between the groundwater monitoring instrumentation that we had and lake level. We were able to develop a correlation that essentially that relationship between the lake level and the groundwater is somewhat dynamic in that it as the lake level goes up, groundwater goes up. As the lake level goes down, groundwater goes down. So the slope stability analysis modeling we did, essentially we took that 2020 failure area and went to the pre-existing conditions and tried to mimic what would make that fail. And part of that process was, one, we took that groundwater monitoring level data that we had and essentially looked at that relationship, adjusted it for what the lake levels were during that time. And then we also looked at, hey, if this was perched even further, does that trigger a failure? Or what is the main drivers of failures here? So we teased that out to essentially try to get that slope to fail in a similar manner. And through all the analysis we did, it was always the impacts on the toe that would lead to greater instability as opposed to groundwater. So I guess we did assess that, and we looked at, is groundwater the big driver here? So like if your toe is completely protected and the groundwater fluctuated around with the site, so essentially if we did all this work, but all that upland work caused the groundwater to change, would that essentially drive this thing to fail either way? And the analysis that we did in the modeling, we couldn't trigger that failure by groundwater alone.
So your professional assessment is that the studies that you did accounted for possibilities of stormwater from upland or riverines from upland, those sorts of things were accommodated based on your work?
I guess to the extent that groundwater impacts, we took the groundwater above and beyond the 100-year groundwater level that we had assessed and looked at that impact. But I guess the main driver in terms of what we found every time was the toe erosion. So I guess in terms of when this all became an issue, the lake levels were at record levels, and you have unprotected toe. Essentially all of the geotechnical borings state that this is a really sandy subsurface. So essentially you can hold a certain angle of repose until you get to a point where it just has to start sloughing and failing. So the geotechnical analysis, or the hydrogeological study that we did, essentially found that toe erosion was the bigger driver as opposed to upland saturation of the groundwater.
I have another question, but
Please.
I don't know if you want me to
No,
wait.
please
Okay.
go.
So this is a follow-up, I think, on my colleague, Mr. Shields' question about dynamic revetment. So on at the report on page 35, it says that the design life of dynamic revetment is difficult to predict. And it's noted that, quote, post-construction monitoring and maintenance of the dynamic revetment is critical. And then I apologize, but I'm going to give an extended quote here because this really surprised me. I'd like you to speak to it. This is a quote at page 35. Monitoring for cobble movement will occur before any maintenance activity on the shoreline. At the time of construction, a representative sample of stones from the dynamic revetment should be marked, have a number chiseled into one side, and their position noted in GPS coordinates. This should occur every 400 feet along the dynamic revetment. At 12-month intervals, each stone should be located, GPS position noted, and then compared with the previous position to determine the amount of movement. However, it's recognized that due to the dynamic nature of the structure and its exposure to a freezing and a high wave energy environment, it's likely that only some portion of the originally marked cobbles placed in the structure will be located during subsequent surveys. The same stones should then be repositioned for the next inspection. So when I read that, that seemed pretty labor intensive. I want to make sure that's what would have to happen for maintenance and whether or not that would have been part of the cost estimate for maintaining this. Thank you.
So our cost estimate is just purely the construction cost. So we didn't put together an opinion of probable maintenance, but the idea there is that this is essentially, as the name indicates, it's dynamic. So depending on what the lake levels are at, the lake is also dynamic, and this is designed to essentially have some movement to it. So the main, I guess, point of that whole section is that there is going to be some monitoring that we would recommend, because these are, there's not a lot of precedents in terms of built dynamic revetments. There are some, but it's traditionally people would armor shorelines with armor stone, which would be, a 3 to 5 ton stone that's placed with a crane and essentially, designed to be fixed in one place, whereas this is actually designed to move around. And the main intent of that that portion of the report is just that it would be beneficial to keep an eye on this and essentially see how it's performing and functioning. I guess for us, we put that in there because it's really good data just to essentially look at how these kind of structures react, and based on where the lake levels are at. The modeling that we did shows that it does, during more severe events, berm up at the front. So there's essentially, we went through a process to size the median stone such that there's limited movement, but there is some movement. As it starts to berm up, it essentially provides additional protection, but just how that berm functions over time, the main purpose there was that we keep an eye on it. If that level of maintenance seems to be above and beyond what the city or anybody is looking to do, there's other ways to do it. You could fly a drone survey, which is a relatively efficient way to just monitor it and see what the crest elevation is doing. I guess, yes, the report does state that, and I understand where your questions come from, but the main purpose of that is that it's beneficial to keep an eye on this.
Thank you.
It'd also be beneficial for your company to do that, to get the data. So perhaps if this were to occur, your company would come in and put the monitoring in and do it for your sake, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a data perspective, we like having data. It's beneficial, I
If
guess.
this project goes through, I'm sure we'll be fine with you coming in and doing the monitoring. Mr. Knobtrop.
Thanks. Appreciate the thorough analysis. I'm not a techie, so I don't have any of the questions that these guys have, nor am I an attorney. But from a practical perspective, let's say that the city bought a Mega Millions lottery ticket tonight, won it tomorrow, money's resolved. From the time that we had the funding secured, based on your experience, what's the time frame to go from getting all the assessments, getting it constructed, getting the bid process? What would you guess in terms of time?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we made assumptions through our estimate too that looked at how quick it would take to move this material from point A to point B and get it to site and move it around. So essentially, to get the material from the quarry to the site alone is anywhere from a 3 to 6 month operation. And to move everything around, I think to construct this whole thing in one season would be challenging. But I guess prior to construction, you'd need to close out the permitting process and all of the approvals and, from a
So would
regular.
you say it's like 2 to 3 years?
I mean, if you guys had funding in place, we have the permit applications ready to submit. So You could, I think, have it permitted within, say, 6 to 9 months. I don't know, let's say a year. And essentially, after that, you'd have to get a contractor. Well, you could have a bid process prior to that, which is usually, let's just say anywhere from 3 to 6 months for that whole process in terms of getting the bid out or the advertisement out to the contractor selection. And then for them to gear up and get going, I would say, it's like 2 years from today.
Okay. So, a lot of my questions, because I'm new this year, a lot of my questions is what happened and how we got here. Although I'm very aware of the problem and from my perspective, where I live, I don't take my grandkids down that one strip of land anymore. I think it's ridiculous on 31. It drives me batty. And for us, we knew it was going to be an expensive process. So most of my questions relate to what the heck we were doing before and how we got to here. Because to me, we knew 2 years ago it was going to be very expensive. And I'm just struggling with, this is now 5 years later. We got this report, very thorough, very, very cool. It's going to be 2 to 3 years more if we had the money. And then I don't see anywhere how we're going to get the money. And I'm really at a loss on why we are spending any more time even talking about this without understanding the funding, because it's massive. It's massive. And I sure prefer to have a much shorter time frame to get this resolved in another. We have beautiful shoreline. The trails are fantastic. And I love it. But there's got to be an alternative much less costly than $20 million to allow people, from where I live to get into downtown by bike. So that's
Any other questions for?
Nope.
Ms. Walker?
Sure. So I thank you so much, Roy, for all your work. I know that this has been a huge laborious effort. I also go back to, like, originally when this road was constructed, this bike path in 2009, it was a public partnership. It involved the county, it involved Resort Township, it involved the city of Petoskey, and probably even Bear Creek Township, I'm assuming. And so where are our public partners now? Here we've borne the cost of all of these assessments and applied for the grants accordingly. And our public partners are not in the room and they're not at the table. And, the city of Petoskey can't do this alone. And $20 million feels like a 2-point millage to me over a 10-year period. I mean, I can kind of do the math. So I wonder about who the original responsible party was in 2008 and 2009 when this was being designed. And I have a feeling it involves somebody beyond the city of Petoskey. So I kind of go back to that, and where you get the money from is our elected officials have been really clear with us that they're not going to be able to leverage this kind of money in Lansing in the form of appropriations or pork or whatever they call it nowadays. So I guess it feels like we're very much alone in this endeavor, and that doesn't feel very good. And we also feel very responsible for the repair of this. It's an economic driver in our community, and I really believe that we have to do our due diligence to restore it. Maybe not to its original that is being proposed, but maybe the more affordable version. And I like the idea of a dynamic repair. So that's all I have to say.
Anyone else? Questions, comments? I have a couple. You stated that there would be a maintenance trail going down is that on city property, or where is that located? Where will that be on? Because that's a concern, because if it's on private, then you need an easement.
I'll have to look at the details, but it's on the portion of the site. It's either city or county property.
Okay.
Where it's located.
Okay. Good answer. Thank you. The cost at 19.8, when was that actually total? Was it total this year? 6 months, a year ago, wasn't it? I mean, because you talked to us before about I thought 21 million thereabouts. That was a year ago. So I take it that 21 million a year ago, or 20 million a year ago, now with, with the cost of everything going up, we're now looking at probably 20-ish, correct?
Well, we just recently got updated material costs from suppliers, and then we put an escalation factor on those. We actually pushed it ahead to, I think, a midpoint of construction of mid-2026. So essentially, we escalated everything to next summer
If it was constructed.
if it was constructed,
Okay,
yeah. And
alright.
then, but we did get updated quotes this fall. So we revised our estimate in August and September. So all of the steel has been updated, all the stone costs have been updated.
Okay. Next question. How many are we looking at bringing this in by truck? Is that correct?
That's what we've currently looked at through discussions with contractors.
Okay. And I've heard a rumor on the number of trucks, and how many semis are we talking about roughly?
So it'd be a lot. I mean, it's 90.
About 10,000.
So I guess if you looked at 90,000 tons divided, yeah, but
10,000 truckloads coming through our roads, bringing the rocks to here.
A lot, yes.
Okay. All right.
Gravel
I'm
drain,
just
so
considering
40
what it's gonna
tons,
do
so
to
40
the
tons
road,
for gravel drain.
Traffic, to the safety. That's a concern to me. I don't know about you guys. Another question. So the permitting is not gonna take that long? The state and the feds, you think they're gonna, within 6 months to a year, stamp it okay?
It's hard to say. We have gone through and had initial discussions with the regulatory agencies. We walked the site with the folks at Eagle.
Okay.
They essentially were the ones that provided the grant funding for this, knowing that we were gonna go after this dynamic revetment approach. And we've recently permitted a similar design in Marquette, Michigan. So I do think that there's a lot of, I guess,
Are we gonna need, you know, we have a 20-foot easement. Whether it's on the ground or in the air, it's that 20-foot easement, correct? Is this project going to, available to put this, this trail with your stuff right on where that 20-foot easement is?
no.
Because,
In order to stabilize the bluff, you have to address issues along the toe, which
Okay.
are beyond the 20-foot.
okay. All right.
Yeah.
Mr. Shields.
Can I follow up on that? Thank you. So you've kind of touched on this. The scope of this project, is it protecting the bluff where, so that would mean the homeowners and the highway, or is the scope just protecting where our current easement is? Is the slope unstable?
So yes, there's a lot of areas that are below the desired factor of safety, and the areas that we've assessed and the improvements that we're proposing increase the factor of safety throughout the entirety of the bluff. So the lower conditions, it improves everything from that respect.
Yeah, it is important to keep that in mind.
So, you know, we will go to questions from you all on this project. Some of us have been in contact with Senator DeMuth, Fairburn, and no funds came through. As you know, the Charlevoix, firehouse got $1 million for their fire truck, a new fire truck. That's all that I could figure out came up to northern Michigan. So I think for us to count on state, House, Senate funding is not realistic. It's not gonna, it's, you know, if somebody has a contact and wants to make it, send us a check on that, do, but, without going into what some other alternatives are, which we have already discussed, I think at some point at council, let's talk about this project right now, right here. If you have something you would like to say to council, step up and give us give us your name, and you don't even have to give us your address if you don't wish, I think by law. If you have something you'd like to say to us, you can step up, just give us your name. You'll have a certain amount of time to speak, and then we'll go from there. Sir?
John, are you gonna do all audience and then online? Cause
I'll
I'm
go
sure
back.
there's, okay, just.
How much time you might want.
Got one question. Why can't this, my rock and stuff, be brought in? Oh, we gotta hit that little button.
There you go.
Try again.
Try again, Jim Wade, I'm the resident. Why can't it be brought in both? From material? I mean, I see a lot of ships carry a lot of rock. It seems like even if they have to dump it off and somehow get it in from.
Could you answer the question for us?
So the offshore conditions here are actually relatively shallow to a quite a lengthy extent offshore. So these material barges that would essentially bring this stone to site typically draft anywhere from 10 to 15 feet. So 10 to 15 feet, depending on the lake level during the time of construction, could be anywhere from say 5 to 700 feet offshore. So
Now, what about Charlevoix? You come into Charlevoix with the.
so
Up there?
we've looked at essentially what we planned for is to offload at a different facility and truck it to site, barging from one location to another. But there's also different options if we used a quarried stone that you could ship it right to the site, all via land-based operations. So logistically, we've looked at both, and we've looked at,
I'm just curious.
yeah, I mean, we aren't trying to say, no, don't do that. And if a contractor came and said, well, I could offload it onto a shallow drafting barge, but when you do that, often the amount of volume you can put would require a lot of additional handling, and that often drives prices up. So
Thank you. Somebody else have a question, a comment? Please.
Name is Clifford today. I'd like to know, what happened to the other stakeholders? Where are they, the other stakeholders? I mean, it's not just the city. This is a project potentially, that will be a great, help to other organizations, several of which you made your name. So where are they? And why should the city be the only stakeholder? I don't get it.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to council at this point? Please step forward. Sir, Mr. Boland.
All right, good evening, Mayor Murphy, members of the council. I'm Brent Boland from Top Michigan Trails Council. I also live in Ward 1 in the city. Thank you for the opportunity to address you tonight. Thanks for hosting this presentation and the meeting beforehand. I think probably 50 people came through that, and this room's full. My phone's been ringing off the hook, maybe yours too. So I think that there's clearly a lot of interest in the community about this. So I'm really glad you guys moved things forward. We've heard a little bit tonight about some of the other partners that are at the table or not at the table. And I think one of the things that everybody should keep in mind, over the last 5 years, what the city has done really well is lead this effort, right? Somebody has to be the quarterback, carry the flag, however you want to say it. And the city has done that to keep things moving forward, which is great. When it comes time to figure out how to get this permitted, installed, paid for, lots of other people are going to have to come to the table. But the important thing that the city has done is keep this moving forward over time. And your staff has done a really great job of that. And that's what we need you all to keep doing, right? Because this is the beginning of the conversation about how we actually get this accomplished. And so I think the important thing is, do I know where the $20 million is coming from? I don't. But I think that we need to keep the conversation going. And that's what you all have done so well for the past 5 years. So the time will come for that, but I will say that I've had conversations with a lot of different people, people who are capable of donating large amounts of money, and there's a lot of interest in supporting this project. I think people have been waiting to hear what the plan is and see we have a plan and it's moving forward, and people are starting to sense that that moment is upon us. And from what I'm hearing, people are ready to start stepping up with some of those kind of commitments. Now, does that mean that somebody's gonna walk in with that Powerball ticket? Probably not. But I think that there is a significant opportunity to bring in several $1 million of private funding, which then makes it much easier to have conversations with state legislators and others. And there's also all sorts of, not just in terms of money allocated in the budget, but going out for grant funds for Great Lakes shoreline work from state and federal sources. So there's lots of different ways to get this paid for. But the most important thing is that the city, again, keeps doing what it has been doing, which is keep moving this project forward so we can get to some resolution for all the people that are interested in seeing this done. I also just wanted to say, you know, for the record, there's about 116,000 users every year on the trail, generates $10 million of economic activity. That's with the connection to Bay Harbor broken, right? That's with not being able to ride to Charlotte. So this is already a huge driver of our local economy, as has been acknowledged, but it's really hard to quantify how much money we aren't making as a community because of this being out there. So $20 million is a lot of money, but in the context of community asset that generates $10 million a year in economic activity, it's actually not that much. And that's not even figuring out like what comes back to the local governments in taxes, because that was too much math. But just in terms of like direct spending, direct and indirect spending by trail users, it's about $10 million a year. So it's significant. And we're certainly here as, you know, your nonprofit partner to help with those fundraising efforts, help with those things in. I mean, this is a really big project. This is, you know, the most popular part of the most popular trail in a beautiful area. You know, it was featured in not just our publications or the city's publications, but statewide and nationwide trail publications had photographs of this trail section. So it's an absolutely iconic part of our community. And these are the kind of, you know, a generation ago, there was a big vision to do this project, right? And now I think what the task for our generation is to, how do we make this sustainable into the future? I think Barrett's like a really good roadmap for us. I think looking at options to, you know, value engineer, possibly, you know, more affordable options would be great. And I will tell you the other thing in closing, you know, in the last 5 years, when people come into our office, people don't say, we want you to build a safe permanent trail on US 31, okay? Everybody wants the Miracle Mile to come back. So, you know, at a bare minimum, would we like to see a safe reconnection so that people aren't in the shoulder of the highway? Absolutely, but many of you were here a couple years ago. We did a study on that because we thought maybe we could find a fast, cheap solution to do something safe up on 31. Well, it was neither fast nor cheap. So it was, you know, $7.5 million to build a trail what we wanted. So, you know, I think if we need to look at some current cost numbers on the current Barrett plan, a value engineered version, and then maybe, you know, what it would cost as like a plan C to do a reconnected trail up on 31, then let's do that. But we have, you know, funding available to partner with the city on additional costs for those things like that. But I think just at this point, it has been 5 years, and I think there's a lot of interest in trying to keep things moving forward. So thank you for everything you've done to get us to this point. Thanks to everybody who came out tonight, and you know, let's just keep moving the conversation forward and figure out how to do it in partnership with everybody. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody have their hand up?
Yep, I'm getting there. It's Albert Mons.
We'll take a comment or two from people online that have been attending and come back to you in a second.
My button, there he goes.
Hello. Yes.
This is Albert Moss, 510 Hillcrest.
Yes, sir.
My concern is the risk of doing nothing. Whether there's a trail there or not a trail there, we have a risk of a washout that could take out part of the highway. And I think that's got to be kept in mind, because I think some people are saying, why would we spend this money for a bike trail? But it's more than that. It is stabilizing that bank. That bank washed out in March 24th of 1913. What was Epler Road was called Washout Road. So that's been unstable there for years. Okay, and if we don't stabilize it, we may not lose, we might not just lose the bike trail, we may lose that link of the highway. What if we lost the highway between Charlevoix and Petoskey? I mean, that's a risk. And so I think you've got to look at this as more than a bike trail, but as a bank stabilization first and foremost, and the bike trail secondary. Thank you.
Thank you. The state does have monitors up on the highway taking account to the stabilization of it, as Rory has mentioned. That is being monitored by the state due to the highway. Have they stated any concerns at this point?
No, none at this point.
Yeah. I don't think we would be bailing and taking care of the state's highway. I think that would be the responsibility of the state of Michigan to take care of the highway. I'm sure it would be. Anyone else wish to speak to council at this time?
Yes, this is Lisa Ungerleider. I'm an online participant. May I speak?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Lisa Ungerleider. I live at 3656 Cliffs Drive. 2 points to the one that you just made in response to the previous speaker. If in fact there could be a state of Michigan interest from preserving this shoreline in protection of Highway 31, perhaps that is an opportunity for us to, with this engineering study in hand, approach them and see if that could give us greater access to funding in terms of a joint effort that would have multiple sponsors and multiple benefits. In line with that comment, I would also just like to say that it seems premature to me to assume that there is no ability to get support at the state or even federal level. As a concerned citizen and someone who deeply misses this, the presence of this connected trail, I've been following this as much as I can through the media for the last 5 years. I'm unaware of a concerted, broad-based community coalition that has gone off in search of that type of funding. If that in fact has occurred, and anyone would like to speak to that, I'd be appreciative. But if not, I think this is a moment and an opportunity for us to come together and see how we can go about doing that. This is an important asset to our region, and it's a fight worth fighting. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to council at this time? Sir, you're second.
Brett Levi, third ward. I thank you, Brett, for your comments. That was great. I think key things that are sticking out with me right now are that this is beginning the press. Woman was great. She's right on. We're just getting started. So I think, comments about where's all the other players, they'll come. We need to. I spoke to somebody earlier this evening who said we might be better off if the county keeps their nose up. So I think our role, what I'm hearing is the city goal is the spearhead, which we've done. Thank you for the few $100 to get this started. And I'm glad my tax dollars went towards that. And secondly, that's a lot of work that these guys have put in, a lot of expertise. So I think it's kind of naive for any of us to say there's got to be a better way. I don't think there's a better way than what these trained experts have dug in and found for us. So let's run with that and see how much harder. One engineering question for you. I watched a documentary recently. I think they said the Magcom Bridge was designed for 300 miles. What's the highest winds they've ever had?
That's a good question.
I think it's gotten over 100, but. So are we talking a similar kind of safety precautions when we were talking about water levels? You guys are way above and beyond anything that's probably ever happened.
I guess it's hard to correlate it with a structure like that in terms of public safety and potential impacts. But yeah, I wish I could answer your question about the wind speeds. I don't know. We do have all that data in terms of, we use all that in our numerical modeling.
You built in a lot of protection.
Yeah.
Way above and beyond anything.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
And then one more thing on that, I think it's, if you've ever folks who walked the bridge, it's kind of nerving when that thing starts swinging, and I don't think most people understand that it actually sways. It sounds like a little bit what we're talking about, this dynamic line on the shoreline, is that fair?
It's hard to compare the two, just given these are breaking waves on the shoreline as opposed to impacts of wind on a structure.
You know, you have to get down to the bottom. If they move too much, then we have to. That's all, that's been proven in other projects and see that sort of dynamic. Not cause for worry.
Well, correct. We've gone through and used multiple numerical models through this process. So in terms of our standard of care, we've gone through that for how we developed our project and essentially describe all the analysis that we did in that design report if you're curious to see that. But essentially we go through a series of different processes with this model called XBeach to look at impacts of the dynamic revetment based on the elevation that I talked about with the water levels and the wave conditions and how that reacts based on the stone size. So we've used that to develop a stone size that we think is relatively stable, but does still have some dynamic nature to it. So there's, yeah, I guess, standard of care has gone into our design in terms of how we got from, how we developed the design platform and plan form for that revetment.
Question, so we call it a bid process. How likely is it or possible is it that something might come under?
That's a good question. I mean, there's in terms of the estimate that we put together, we describe the class of cost estimate that we do. So there is a potential that it's above or below, and we do give the approximate percentage of that. I forget off the top of my head what it was above and below, but I guess with every project that we see bid, it seems like there's often a relatively large spread often between high and low bids, and sometimes it comes down to a more qualified bidder that's more expensive. But a lot of that has to do with the public bidding process. So
I think that's one more reason for city. Keep looking, that we think might. But no, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to council? Sir.
My name's Scott Redmond. I'm a pipe. And just to a point that one of the online folks had mentioned about the highway and the structure of the highway. Obviously, none of us, although I'm a great trail user, could ever try and prioritize the trail system above the highway. But one of the things I noticed when you asked, you said the highway's done extensive testing. And they haven't, if I heard you right, they haven't come back with anything negative. Have we actively requested, and you probably have, actively requested a report that states there is or isn't? And if I could just request that either city council pursue some type of report in the form of a document, or perhaps if the person from the state wants to come and let the public know, yes, there is no risk to the highway. We can focus on the trail without worrying about the highway. So I don't know, did I hear that right? That we just haven't heard from the state that there wasn't anything wrong, or have we heard from the state that there is not?
no,
There's a difference.
the state actually hired a separate consultant to study this site before we did, and we referenced that report in our report. So if you want to, yeah, this MDOT did during, I think it was 2020, or maybe it was prior to our study. They had a different engineering group look at different sites around Michigan that had coastal impacts, and this was one of the sites that they do focus on. So I don't know if you've read that report or not, but there's a link to it in our report. So yeah, the state is aware, and they've also installed the slope inclinometer. I did give a shout out to Eagle with respect to what they did for financing with this. There's been a lot of questions and comments about stakeholders. So I think it should be on the record that MDOT has been a really good stakeholder, and we've collaborated with them throughout the process. And they also in addition to putting that slope inclinometer up there, they actually did all of the borings in the right of way of the roadway for our study and also did a LiDAR survey of the entire project area. So yeah, I just feel like that should be known.
And representatives from the city have reviewed the same report and acknowledged and agreed with. You're saying, obviously, there's significant as to whatever that, but we are fully cognizant there is no risk to the highway at this point.
Today.
Sure, we know it can change.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else want to speak to council? Sir?
Nathan Fry, resident, also in business on the bluff. Just curious as to, you said it's difficult to get anything in from the shore. You said, can we get all we need in through the 20-foot easement that's currently there? And you said, no. What other type of staging would take place as far as getting the materials to site? Would you be utilizing a crane from the highway, get down? Would you just be going in from Magnus East Park to get to the site? What effect would that have on East Park and, usability of the park? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so the East Park, we didn't consider just because of the potential impacts of the existing steel sheet pile wall on that end of the trailway, if they had to drive any kind of equipment, and there wasn't, with our proposed plan, it doesn't open up, I guess you'd have to do more damage than harm, or I guess you'd have to grade areas that we're currently not touching to create a appropriate access down to the beach that way. So that's why we looked at coming in on the eastern side of that current coastal collapse. The soil nailing that's proposed in that failure area, the coastal collapse area that's towards the top of the slope, it could be that a specialty contractor or specialty piece of equipment has to be brought in and tied off up top, or however the contractor wants to approach that. It might require, I guess, working from the top of the bluff as well. We haven't looked at taking out swaths of the bluff to try to get down or anything like that. It seemed like Magnus Park was, I guess, the best place with respect to a staging area that accesses the trailway with a direct route to this particular area. But yeah, construction, logistics and access with this site, just given the nature of it in terms of being confined vertically from the lake as well as from the bluff and the other ends of the trailway, it will be a challenge.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak to council at this time? Anybody online? Sarah? No? City council will be at next meeting, likely. We'll be sitting down and having a discussion on where we want to go from here. A lot of good points have been made. We appreciate you attending. I think the number one thing that I have to always remember is public safety. And our number one responsibility up here of these people right here, the number one responsibility of a city manager, of us, is public safety. I have grave concerns about if this takes 3-4 years, how many people are going to be riding bikes on that dangerous curve. And I personally have personal feelings about it that we need to look at alternatives to this. Cost-wise, safety-wise, and expediting it to get it going. So we will be meeting at the next city council meeting. You can check it. It'll probably be on the agenda. We welcome you to attend and be a part of the discussion. Nothing's going to be solved tonight. This was merely a presentation by Baird and by Rory to give us information to sit down and talk about it later. So at this point, that's the end of the presentation. I thank you for attending. And we look forward to working with you in the future on this. Thank you. I think it went fine. It went fine.
Now you're going
Have you looked? Yeah, definitely take this.
I appreciate it. I mean,
I'm gonna try that.
Like waiting.
answering on the spot.
Like what?
If I give you a. Thank you.
I did too. And kind of talked about it.
Said probably 80% hard.
And it was, yeah, these were the final designs that were approved to move forward, so I don't think it was as much of a possibility as we had hoped
Yeah,
it to
see-
be. I compared it similarly to like what Plain Mountain had done with their,
I know, and they were green.
yeah. Not the same thing. But I thought that would have been a really good alternative to what felt like over engineering, but it sounds like this is gonna be the best scenario. Yeah, there was within Baird and Associates, like,
Okay.
so have a mock-up design for that.
All right, we're gonna continue, sir.
Yeah.
We're gonna start city council, the rest of the meeting. You're more than welcome to stay. Again, Rory, thank you very much for all your time, your effort. I know you put your heart into this as well. Thank you for what you've done for the city.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Consent agenda is the adoption. Oh, public hearing. Oh, next is a public hearing. Whoa. Receipt of comments concerning programs and services proposed by the city's downtown management board for 2026 and recommended for financing by use of the special assessment method at a 2.6% rate increase compared to the 2025 formula. I go to Sweden, Downtown Management Board Director.
Again, this is the hearing on the 2025 levy for the 2026 programs and services budget.
Are you clicking? Oh, is it up there? See if it works.
It wasn't working.
It wasn't working? Is it on? Well, I just did it. I did it. Try it. Just slide it. There it goes. Yay. All right. Hold on though. I'm gonna let in our attorney. Now you might have to do it.
The 2026 programs and services budget is proposed to be 214,721. This revenue amount would include a 2.6% increase in the special assessment levy, bringing in an additional 3,175. And then the budget also is showing use of fund balance carryover of 35,945. At the end of 2025, the programs and services carryover fund balance is projected to be approximately $189,000. Because we had discussion for several meetings and at the manager board level too about use of fund balance. And what is fund balance there for? What is a reasonable amount to hold a fund balance for an assessment for services on an annual basis? This is data showing what the fund balance has been over the past 10 years. And as we discussed, it increased significantly after COVID, partly because programs that were, or events that were planned were not able to occur. There was also staffing issues. I think you only had a downtown director at the time and a programs and services person for that period. So it did build up significantly. Last year we anticipate using 104,000. You'll see we anticipate using 85,000. This year and proposing that to use or around 35,000, that gets us still to about $150,000 fund balance. The revenues and, the discussion has been, how long are we going to be able to use the fund balance? And how much should the current assessment be covering expenses? So this is comparing the 2025 revenues to the proposed revenues. And you will see that the fund balance percent of the budget has dropped from 37% to 17%. There has been an increase in the amount the current year assessment is covering of revenues, and as well as program revenue, which is sponsorships and other expenses by businesses. Now, when you look at that, it's also, the expenditures are quite a bit different. So you will see our budget this year is almost 60,000, proposed to be 60,000 less than last year. And what you will see is one of the big changes is moving the beautification line item, which for next year is proposed at $30,000 out of programs and services to be covered by the parking fund. So you'll see the chart on the right only has 4 revenue or expenditure categories, where the one on the left has 5. So that is a big, so when you're looking at the percent of revenues coming from fund balance, the percent is smaller partly because the budget itself is smaller. So the programs and services as a breakdown of 214 to 121,000. That is training. We do business trainings, we do workshops for businesses. That's business retention, recruitment, market analysis, that sort of thing. That is proposed a large decrease to $6,000. Marketing is $44,700. And events, at 72,005. We break our events down into, are they business events, like trying to directly get people into businesses or buying from businesses, or are they more community based? So if we look at sidewalk sales, if we look at restaurant week or ladies opening night, where we are expressly doing an event to get people into business. That actually is only is less than 20% of our event budget. The community events are open house, they're Sounds of Summer, Winter Wonderland weekends, movies in the park. Those are events that are promoting downtown as a community heart and giving both locals and visitors a free event to go to. So open house, if you consider that event alone, probably most businesses spend more on refreshments for the public at that event than they do on their annual assessment. But for years, downtown Petoskey was told that, we weren't doing enough to compete with Boyne City. Boyne City was doing strolls the street. They were getting all these people. You needed to do something Friday night. So we have our Sounds of Summer series in the summer, 5 weeks, and we partner with BlissFest. And it has taken about 3 years, but this last year, most of the shows probably had close to 300 people, between 200 and 300 people. So that, again, the events take a long time to grow, but that clearly is an event that has successfully increased its participation. And then administration, which is staffing and overhead, at 91,821. So proposed changes for this year: revenues, assessment increase of 2.6%. increase as a percent of revenues, program revenue, special assessment share, and decrease in use of fund balance. And on the expenditure side, beautification moving to the parking fund. Decrease in expenditures for administration, sidewalk sales, winter wonderland weekend, and men's night. And also decrease in economic enhancement expenditures. The proposed levy rate at 2.6% for the first floor would be 22.19 cents per square foot. Non-first floor, which whether that was lower level or upper floors, 5.58 cents per square foot, and vacant land 6.66% per square foot. A 1,500 square foot first floor commercial space. Again, it's the property owner who's assessed. Most property owners either pass the bill directly on to the tenant or it's built into the rent. That was 1,500 square foot commercial space with the proposed budget would see an $8.40 increase in their assessment. Two-story building with 5,000 square foot on the ground floor and an upper floor and the lower level would see an increase of $42. As just the discussion of whether we use fund balance or not. For the proposed budget, taking the 214,721, if the current year assessment were to pay 100% of that, the rate would have to increase 43%. And that same 1,500 square foot ground floor commercial space increase would be $141 a year. And that 5,000 square foot ground floor, second floor basement would have an increase of almost $700. And I just bring that up as that's something that management board looking forward is going to look at. What are they comfortable with as a fund balance? And do we lean more into the assessment or do we spend more time trying to get sponsorships for programs and services? So again, the budget's proposed at 214,721.
What is the, for the large vacant property on Mitchell?
There.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out. Where,
Want to open the public hearing?
I think it's on page 4.
okay,
And it might also be on, it's showing 2 different places.
okay. Okay. This, we're to open this for a public hearing. Is there anybody in the public wishes to speak to the council at this point on this? There are none. So with no comments, I will close this public hearing. And now we'll go to council's questions for you.
Is it appropriate for me to ask a question at this juncture? No, you're right.
You can, yeah, you can ask questions now or wait till you get down to the agenda item, whichever council wants to do.
Okay, it's
What do you-
just a very brief question for Ms. Tweeden. Ms. Tweeden, did part of the current fund balance growth come from a transfer from another fund into fund balance? Wasn't there a transfer in recently that grew the fund balance? That's what I'm trying to confirm.
There was not a transfer from, I think you're speaking of in 2024. There was a transfer from the parking fund, because that was the first year salaries were not covered by the parking fund and they were moved over to programs. Last year's budget and this year's budget. And they come.
Right, but that transfer went to,
The program. Like,
right. Thank you.
Since you presented it, I guess I feel okay to make this question. City council voted about 2020, 19, 16, 18, something like that, that you would increase the cost, the the meters would go up, correct? So that created a $50,000, $60,000, $80,000 surplus. And that was put into the,
Parking fund.
was gonna be a parking, but was your fund balance, is that correct? That's,
That's the parking lot.
I know, I guess I would ask that next year, personally, I'd like to see this whole thing, the parking, the marking, I'd like to see the whole budget, the whole package from you, rather than next time we'll be hearing about the parking, and we're talking of transfers in and out, but yet I'm requesting, I don't know, council, it's up to you guys, but that's my only comment, I guess, at this point.
I'm happy to do that. The reason we did not do that this year is because of the assessment process has to start so early. That if we do the parking fund at the same time, we're going off of revenue projections from August or July. So to have more accurate year-end numbers for the parking budget, is why we separated them out. And there is no parking transfer this year. So this is uniquely programs and services.
Council, anything?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amy. So we've closed that piece of it. Now we go to consent agenda, adoption of proposed resolution that would confirm the approval of the following. The October 9th, 2025 regular session city council meeting minutes, as well as acknowledge a receipt of certain transactions administratively that have occurred since October 9th, 2025, as well as the September 2025 revenue and expenditures report in front of you, as well as the 2025 third quarter investment report as well, council. Do you have any questions on that data? Ms. Demore?
I just have one item that's missing from council comments. At the last meeting, I expressed a concern about the ongoing requirement that constituents provide their address when offering public comment at city council meetings, and requested that we revisit the city council meeting procedures, which was last updated in 2012. So I just asked that that be included in the council comments. Thank you.
Just for clarification, I did not ask for addresses because I did do some research on that. And that is not something that you need to necessarily do. I believe it's an option, but I believe it's best not option at that point. Anyone else on the minutes?
Oh, not on the minute.
Or a motion?
I have some questions on the revenue and expenditure report.
Please.
So, since we're 2 months left in the year, basically 2.5 months left in the year, I'm looking at the 9/30 statements and trying to compare the actual to the budget. And I've got just a few questions on what looks like significant dollar differences to spend or to get in before the end of the year. And I just wanted to get an idea of, is it going to happen or not? In the activities section, grants, we had budgeted a 2.3 million and we got in 1.5 million. Would you expect the other 800 to come in before the end of the year, or is that going to be a shortfall?
I don't expect all that to come in by the end of the year, so we'll just have to keep tracking that, but that will likely end up, we will not realize that revenue by the end of the year.
Okay, then on the expenses side, most of the big variances on what we've got yet to spend that was budgeted versus what has been spent goes into the general category of construction on several of the funds, and I didn't want to go through one by one, but would you say that the ones that have a lot yet to be spent on the various departments are not going to get spent in the next 2 months? Or are you kind of seeing this all, and where I'm trying to get to, Shane, is it's trying to understand what happens if we have a money budgeted mostly in the construction side that doesn't get spent, Does it just go to fund balance or does it automatically roll over into next year? I'm trying to understand that process.
Yeah, it doesn't roll over. It's budget that's not spent or realized. So we would have to reallocate those funds in the next year, going
So-
forward.
Okay, so what we approved a couple meetings ago with the CapEx budget, did that for 26 anticipate things that are not getting spent that were budgeted for in 25? That's not gonna happen. It's a lot of money. And I'm wondering if, are we not getting things done that we plan to, or we?
Yeah, I guess I would need to know directly which items you're talking
Okay.
about so I can talk a
I
little
can
bit.
give you then, and I'll give you an email, because it's all of them are in the construction side,
Okay,
the line item for construction.
okay.
Those are where the big differences come out.
Okay, yeah, go ahead and send me an email and I'll respond to all.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Other questions, anybody? Will I have a motion?
I'll be happy to make a motion, Mayor, to approve the proposed resolution that would confirm the approval of those 4 line items.
I have a motion from Ms. Walker, second from,
And I'm sorry, with the addition of my colleague's comments about public comment at the end of last meeting.
Thank you. Support.
motion with the changes by Ms. Walker, a second from Ms. Demore. Any other discussion, council? I go to Ms. Beck for roll.
Demore,
Aye.
Shields,
Aye.
Walker,
Aye.
Naktrab,
Aye.
Murphy.
Yes. Motion passes 5-0. Now we go to public comments. Anybody wish to make a public comment at this point, online or other? There being none, we go now to City Manager Horn's City Manager report.
I'm gonna try to expedite our meeting a little bit. I knew that we would be going long with Rory's presentation, so I did not submit a report. Certainly happy to answer questions, but just for the sake of time flow, I did not submit a report.
It's fine.
Quick question.
Ms.
Yeah.
Demore.
Just could we please get a copy of Rory's presentation tonight and Amy's as well? I'd appreciate that.
Yes, and I will also put that presentation on the website as well for
Great.
folks to take a look.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Good. Anything else, city managers, questions? Okay, moving on to appointments, consideration appointment for compensation commission, and it's for Deb Cadu. She served on it in the past, this last 3 years. She's asking, she stated she was interested in continuing. She felt she told me it was very educational, and she feels good that she is able to give time to the city operations. Do I have a possible motion or questions about her?
So moved.
Motion from Ms. Demore.
I'll second the motion, Mayor.
Ms. Walker, any other discussion, council? I go to Ms. Beck for roll.
Demore,
Aye.
Walker,
Aye.
Naktrab,
Aye.
Shields.
Aye.
Murphy.
Passes
Thank you.
5-0. Thank you for serving, Ms. Cadu. Next is old business. We have 6 things to go through here, 3 old, 3 new. Second reading and possible adoption of the proposed ordinance amending parking for eating and drinking establishments. I'm gonna turn that over to City Manager Horn.
I'm gonna save us more time as well. Planning Commission met last Wednesday. Reviewed Jimmy John's site plan. That site plan has been approved and it meets the current parking code, so there is no need for this to go forward to second reading. Obviously, Planning Commission, Zoning Committee is working on parking regulations. We will essentially wait until those are complete, so we will not need to make any modifications at this point for that project.
There you go. So we'll move on to the next one. That's the second reading, possible adoption of proposed ordinance amending chapter 8, article 5, regulating transient merchants. Manager Horn, or we'll go to Ms. Beck.
Yes, thank you. So this is a second reading of the transient merchant, or transient ordinance amendment to transient merchants, chapter 8, article 5. As our city attorney Laura mentioned a couple meetings ago, that a lot of this language, current language is outdated, simply not necessary. A lot of it is driven by state statute. So with the help of our legal counsel, they kind of narrowed the ordinance down to help staff somewhat identify and decipher transient applicants. So second reading, I can ask any questions. We do have our legal counsel, Mackenzie, on line 2 to help if you guys have further questions.
Do you have questions regarding this?
I just have a comment.
Understand that this is nothing more than cleaning up what has been on the books and for an eternity. So, Mr. Moore.
So I just have a comment on the record. I remain concerned about the efficacy and effectiveness of this ordinance moving forward, as it seems to have more exceptions than applications in terms of who it governs. And the terms, quote, raised, produced, or manufactured in section 8-113AI remain undefined for its application by our city clerk. It is an improvement over the existing dated ordinance. Based upon the recommendation of the city attorney and her collaboration with the city clerk, I will support this moving forward with the understanding that Ms. Beck will keep us apprised should she encounter challenges with the application of this provision. Thank you.
Are you making a motion? Is that what you did or not?
No, this is making a comment.
Do I have any other discussion or possible motion?
I'll make a motion, Mayor.
I have a motion for Mr. Shields. Do I have a second? Which can then open up for discussion as well.
I'll support it.
I have a motion from Mr. Knobtrop, second from motion from Mr. Shields, second from Mr. Knobtrop. Any other discussion that people have questions? Mr. Knobtrop.
One was a clarification, and I read through the opinion. There's a lot of references on the exception for religious and social canvassing and political. Does that also include nonprofits like Girl Scout cookies? It doesn't seem to be religious, but are they, I'm assuming they're exempt also?
So Joe, are you referring to the transient ordinance that we're talking about, or the next agenda item, which is talks about solicitors and everything?
There's two
Next
different-
one? Okay. No, that's
I was
okay.
wondering, I thought that was, okay. You all good?
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Does the public wish to speak on this to council? Okay. So what we will do, we will schedule
Nope, this is a second reading, so can,
readings possible motions. So
We
we
have,
have a motion from Mr. Shields, second from Mr. Knobtrop. Public state, no comments. We'll go to Ms. Beck for roll.
Shields,
Aye.
Knobtrop,
aye.
Walker,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Murphy.
Right. Motion passes 5-0. Next is the second reading and possible adoption of a proposed ordinance amending Article 17 and Article 20 on the zoning ordinance.
Yes, just continuing our discussion from previous meeting. This is coming from the ZBA, which went on to the Planning Commission. We set a public hearing, reviewing this language based on city council input and our attorney's input. We did add some clarifying language at first reading that survives this second reading. So would be entertain any questions or any further input for this second reading of this ordinance.
Mr. Moore.
I just had one constituent question, and that was whether or not the application of this was retroactive or from this point forward. My assumption is that it is from this point forward.
Yeah, it would be from adoption, which would be 7 days after enactment.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry, 14 days, sorry,
days.
thank you.
Take effect 14 days after.
Thank you.
Mr. Moore,
Ready for a motion?
I am.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second the motion.
I have a motion from Mr. Moore, a second from Mr. Shields. Any other discussion, council, on this? Does the public wish to weigh in on this? I go to Ms. Beck for roll.
Demore,
Aye.
Shields,
Aye.
Walker,
Aye.
Knobtrop,
Aye.
Murphy.
Yes, aye. Motion passes 5-0 on this one. Now we're to last three, and that's new business. Discussion on door-to-door solicitation, canvassing, and handbills. This is discussion and not a motion.
All right, so this was me again, folks.
Go.
So over the years, many years, I receive inquiries from nonprofits, for-profit businesses, individuals wanting to solicit and go door to door for selling materials, canvassing, you name it. So as you can tell, I asked our legal counsel to provide an overview of what the city has the authority to regulate and what we cannot regulate. And they submitted their memo, which we did include in the packet. And I've kind of narrowed it down to like 3 sections of why I'm bringing this up and looking for direction from you. So one, the overview of what we can and cannot regulate. So we know we just passed the ordinance for transient merchants, as they noted in their memo. The other items are what we can't regulate, which are any political, religious, and social canvassers due to their constitutional protection on the First Amendment. And so we know those groups, we can't regulate based on registration, permit requirements, et cetera. What we can regulate, if council so desires, is kind of the second thing I'm looking for, is direction on, do we want to regulate solicitors that don't fall into the category of political, social canvassers or groups, or religious groups? And what we mean by that, Foster Swift provided that I don't have experience, but I believe Shane has in other communities that he can speak to, a do not knock or do not solicit, what do we call that? What?
Yeah, in the community I came from, we had a do not knock list that if you were a resident and didn't want someone knocking on your door soliciting, you could register your address and we would provide that address to the canvasser. And they obviously should avoid those addresses that signed up. So that is an option that we could create and maintain a do not knock list. And again, we would provide that list to anyone that was be going door to door.
Thank you. So overview, direction from you guys if you want an ordinance created to do not knock and creating that registration and list. And then the third kind of portion, kind of pulling it all together, is we currently have an ordinance in chapter 3 discussing or distinguishing handbills. So think of brochures, pamphlets, flyers that are getting distributed on private property. And we currently, the ordinance, which I did not indicate what year that was indicated, but I think it was many years ago, that we prohibit the distribution time-wise, so 6 p.m. or after 6 p.m., excuse me, and on holidays. And as our legal counsel indicated, they're advising that it's unlikely that this restriction is constitutional and recommends that that ordinance be amended. So not only are we asking what your thoughts are on solicitation, but also direction to, we should amend that ordinance, and I would imagine that will be coming before you soon. So questions, I'm happy to answer. I know it's a little bit broad, but that was kind of my intent also. I'll just give you a few examples of what I've received over the years. We get calls from financial investors wanting to door knock and basically hand out their business card. So looking to sell their service and get business. So to me, that's a for-profit business. We have house cleaning companies getting, starting up and wanting to go door to door to offer their services. We get canvassing groups for utilities, educational resources. Some of them are waived, some of them are not. You were speaking to the Girl Scouts. I believe, and maybe Mackenzie can chime in, I believe that they would be exempt because they're nonprofit, but as legal counsel informed me, not all nonprofits are necessarily charitable. So in their memo, charitable organizations soliciting donations must register with the Michigan Attorney General under the Charitable Organizations and Solicitations Act. And while the city may request proof of this state registration, it likely cannot impose additional local permit or fee requirements on charitable canvassing. I did specifically ask legal, since if they are a charitable organization, if there needed to be an ordinance requesting that administratively the city can ask that. They said no. I could just ask for proof of that registration, or if you guys were interested in creating an ordinance with a do not knock and like holistically, we could put an item in there that we could require proof of registration if they're a charitable organization. Mackenzie, was that correct on the Girl Scouts?
Yeah, that's correct. The Charitable Organizations and Solicitations Act has a pretty broad definition for charitable organization. Essentially, they just define it as a benevolent, educational, philanthropic, humane, patriotic organization. So I think it's a little on the line there whether that would include the Girl Scouts or not. It's just one of those things that the statute has a pretty broad definition, so they might be required to be registered. We can look into case law a little bit more specifically if we want to try to find any examples of that. But you know, I think that the Girl Scouts could be included and be required to do that state registration, but not 100% sure on that just because how the statute is. It's a pretty broad definition.
What happens if we set up a list? What is the enforcement? Somebody comes and knocks on my door, I'm on the list, I call the police, what do they get them arrested? Is it a
No, so in that
fine?
case, it would likely be more of like a civil infraction here, like any other violation of your ordinance. I mean, obviously, the individual homeowners can call the police if that happens. You can kind of treat that as if you're going to those addresses with no solicitation, that it's trespassing, but it would more likely be, at least in the ordinance, how that would be enforced as a civil violation.
Ms. Demore, you had something, you said something.
Well, I guess my question is, since, okay, the Supreme Court has upheld ordinances requiring all persons to adhere to no soliciting signs posted on residences and a permissible, do we have to have an ordinance, or is it sufficient if individuals post a no soliciting sign?
I mean, it's sufficient if an individual posts like a no soliciting sign. Again, that wouldn't be that the city could then have a civil violation for it. That'd be the individual homeowners. I think the list, is the best option in terms of the case law that we've seen. I believe there is an Ohio case where the ordinance just said if an individual person has a no soliciting sign and you go there, then I can't remember if it was a city or township, then they can regulate. But there's a lot stronger case law with having that specific do not solicit list, because then the city is also kind of on notice as to who those houses and homeowners are.
How many cities that you work with have that sign up list?
I know of one for sure that I've worked on that has it. I'm not aware of, there definitely could be others, but I know specifically of one city that we work with that has a list.
Can I ask which one?
I believe it's the city of Potterville, but I'm not 100% correct on that. I just remember looking through our files to see if we had an example of this, and I did see one. But I can look more in depth into that information as well.
Mr. Shields.
Thanks, Mayor. I am not interested in the city regulating solicitation.
My concern, if I understood the mayor correctly, is along the same lines as him, like this, creating an enforcement layer for this seems to me to be a lot. It's just my tentative thinking. Having said that, I fully support our legal counsel eliminating all aspects here that may be deemed unconstitutional. We should promptly do that.
Mr. Shields, Mr. Knobtrob.
Since we're looking for comments, you know, I'm always sensitive to the burden in the city to manage all this stuff. And there's an old golf expression, less is more. And reading this opinion from Foster Swift, we don't need more, if, you know, since I've been on this council, it seems like all we're doing is creating regulations. And to me, this is an opportunity to get rid of some regulation. And freedom of speech is a strong thing. If people don't want to deal with it, don't answer the door.
Ms. Walker,
I don't have any comment, Mayor.
okay. Well, do you wish to move forward on this because it's a discussion and it's, the staff wants to know, where do you want to go with this? I hear two saying nothing.
So I guess just for clarification, I'll also say we don't currently have any regulations, which I know that. However, we've had this application that staff gets alerted in public safety of this door-to-door application, but we don't have an ordinance to like back it up. So it's been very convoluted for all the years I've been here, and no one knows where or how it came about and why we're charging $50 for a door-to-door application. However, we don't have an ordinance in place. And I do get questions saying, can we go to door-to-door? So what I've been saying is, yes, you can go door-to-door because we don't currently have an ordinance. And that's fine. It's just, we have this application that was produced at some point in time, but nothing to back it up. So kind of, again, cleaning up items that have been ongoing for a number of years.
Mr. Shields.
Thanks, Mayor. And then from my seat, I'm agreeing with Mr. Knobtrob that I'm saying to you, Sarah, is yes, continue to say from, you may solicit, and then to lessen the burden on you, I would recommend removing that application.
Mr. Moore.
So I'd be interested to know if our city manager has a recommendation for us on this or any thoughts, along with legal counsel and Ms. Beck. Thoughts?
I mean, I think we at times get feedback from residents that are frustrated with people going to their door, but you could simply not answer the door, I guess, and that's a solution. I had somebody knock on my door at 9 o'clock the other night, and my dog went crazy, and which I appreciated, but that's a distraction. If you're sitting around trying to have dinner with your family and someone's knocking on your door trying to sell you a vacuum cleaner, for instance, I guess you can not answer the door, but it does disrupt your evening. And if we can take a more proactive approach, that could be fine. But I also like the idea of let people do what they do and make that choice. I'd love, if we're gonna do that, we'll remove the application and just be done with this completely. The community I came from took a more aggressive approach and maintained a do not knock list. We were religious with updating that and providing that. And if we found out that we got a complaint, we followed up with it and issued you a civil infraction. So that's just a different mindset, and that's fine. Certainly I like less is more, and if we don't need something, there's no need to have it in place.
I'll only add that some of these groups that canvass, so they're not truly selling anything. Sometimes I've never heard of these groups. They're not local. So I will rely on legal counsel to help me distinguish, other than me asking for that registration form from the state. And if they don't provide it, then I mean, I can only go off from their word, or I'll get legal involved because I don't know the difference between a charitable nonprofit who may be exempt or a nonprofit that is not charitable. So those sometimes, but I mean, that's why we lean on legal counsel also, because they don't provide me with the registration form. I can only go off what they're providing, so.
Mr. Moore,
So one thought would be for us at this point, not to go forward and sort of monitor the situation and see if issues bubble up that warrant us establishing a more structured method to deal with this. That's just a thought.
I like that idea. I think that's doing what Mr. Knobtrob and Mr. Shields have mentioned. And I like Mr. Moore's idea of let's monitor this, take a look at it. Trusting staff, you guys will report back to us and give us the feedback of, hey, this has become an issue.
Mhm.
Then we'll address it. How's
Okay,
that?
sounds good.
Yep, so I'm gonna remove that door-to-door application because it doesn't apply at all.
Yep.
And so where it started from, I don't know.
Mr. Knobtrob?
One quick clarification. Tina made a really good point and the opinion said it was there. Are we going to then clean up the things that are unconstitutional or that we probably shouldn't be doing anyway? Is that going to move forward with that part?
That's what I would recommend.
Remove that stuff
Okay.
that
If
is
that's,
in violation of civil rights, yes.
so yeah, that would be chapter 3. There's a couple sections in there, so
Chapter 3,
staff will work
fine.
with legal counsel and getting that updated and it'll come back before you.
That'll be great. Okay? Good counsel? All right. Next. Adoption of a proposed resolution that would approve programs and services established as assessment district and direct that an assessment roll be prepared for subsequent review by the city council. I need a motion or a discussion or something, Any discussion? Mr. Moore?
It might be time for more chocolate.
No.
Pass it on down.
No, we're on two things, so we're moving forward. Eat candy in 20 minutes. Go.
So there were no comments from business owners. Is that correct?
I did have one. I had a call from the Watershed Council. She stated, and I looked it up, it was $631, and she wanted to know why, do we have to charge nonprofits that are nonprofit organizations for this assessment? And I said I would mention that. I don't know.
I can,
I did mention that there.
speak to that, I remember.
My understanding is it was decided several years ago, nonprofits are required to do the assessment.
Okay.
They are part of downtown, they benefit from the marketing and promotions that we do, gives them more visibility. The same could be for Crooked Tree. They are a nonprofit and they pay the assessment. So that was the decision and everybody will.
I'm having trouble finding, I don't know why, but I'm sure it's right in front of me. For the major Hosky hole.
It's on the lake, and it's on the Lake Street side of things, on the Lake
Oh,
Street,
it's on the Lake Street side of it.
200 East Lake Street.
What is that?
Maybe on Lake Street is the.
And what is our charge for per square foot if you go
Vacant.
vacant land? What is the charge?
Six.
The
The mark of the beast.
Yeah.
6.66.
0.06 cents.
And what is the cost on per square foot on a first floor building?
22.
1 point.
22 cents?
Thank you.
Bring it up.
Yeah.
So I'll just go back. Are you clicking or am I clicking? Oh, no, I am. I just, right here.
First floor is 22.19.
Right.
22 cents. And vacant is
It was
six cents.
Yeah.
Perhaps we should move the vacant building square foot to equal what we have for first floor for everybody else.
You think like as like
Why are we giving them-
incentivize?
Why are we giving them a discount?
I don't know all the history of it.
I don't care about the history, I'm cared about moving forward, what are we doing?
And it is, because the question has also been raised, why can't we charge vacant buildings more?
Mhm.
And it's because it's a fee for service. So if you have a vacant storefront, ground floor, and we are marketing downtown and we are getting people to come downtown and see that space and maybe be interested in it, there is a value to that. And I
Value to what?
believe that there's a value to that. So what they're paying, whether they have a tenant or they don't have a tenant. I believe for vacant land, it was seen as the value of the assessment was not as great as if you had existing buildings with vacant space in it. So if council wishes to look at that, I recommend speaking of it.
City attorney, do we have freedom to address that issue and raise the cost of vacant building? Piece of participation in a process?
Yeah.
Huh?
I'm not sure exactly. I can ask our kind of go-to special assessment expert.
Like,
And do you have, yeah, and do we have any background maybe or not about why or why not it's this way?
we want to punish them.
There's no.
We want to be
Okay.
punitive.
Right,
We want punitive assessments.
I have a question, Mayor. It's
Yes.
currently, just so I'm understanding where we're coming from, currently the assessment applies under this schedule, whether you're vacant, full, whatever. Correct?
Ground floor, correct? If you're an existing building, that's correct.
So that's good. So that's the logic. And so that schedule applies to all real estate in the central business district. And it's applied on their tax return, their real estate taxes, or is it a separate bill?
It's a separate
Assessment.
And is it a lienable thing if they don't pay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so some of these Yahoo's people that are vacant, they get billed, and are we collecting it from everybody?
Yes.
So there's no bad debt.
If they do not pay the assessment, I believe by June, it goes,
Mark.
by a certain point, it goes on the tax roll and the county makes us whole and they have to go to the county.
Okay.
Similar to tax.
Thank you.
Mr. Moore.
So if I'm understanding where we are correctly, anything like this would have to be prospective going forward because we've already had a hearing on the proposed amounts for this year.
Yes.
So what we're asking of legal counsel, the mayor's question would be about whether next year,
Going forward.
right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
That was my question, was going forward, not looking back, but what's ahead? I wish
Yeah,
that-
I'm not sure on that. I'll look into it though, just because sometimes there's specific rules regarding with the hearings and when changes can be made, so I'd have to check on that.
Okay. I guess you'll be coming, won't you, with the parking? Will that be coming to city council in the future?
Yes, the parking amendments that we just put forward, or the parking tickets.
The budget, the
Parking fund.
fund budget. Okay, because I'll have questions. I'll wait for those. I guess it's, I look at it just as one big pot of money, so do you have, not you, but the DMB, the DDA, do you have a capital improvement plan for every lot and every meter, all the meters and everything that we do? Do we have a capital improvement plan so that you won't get surprised 10 years from now when we have to pay 5 of the places or 3 of them or 2 of them and we haven't got enough in fund equity? Do we have a capital improvement plan that spells out on a continuum for 20 years out?
It is in your city CIP.
It is. Okay, all right. Okay. Mr. Shields.
Entertain, or would you entertain a motion there?
Please.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the proposed resolution.
Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion, Mayor.
A motion from Mr. Shields, second from Ms. Walker. Any other discussions?
Just,
Mr. Knobtrop, yes.
where do we leave it on the land? Are we asking that is not part of it? So we're gonna keep it the way it is on the vacant land?
Yes.
Yeah.
So are you saying, are we asking the attorney to see, can we charge it, increase it next year if we wanted to?
Yes, yes.
So that's
He's good. She's gonna do a research.
Thank you.
Yep. Any discussion, any comment from public? There being none, I go to Ms. Beck for roll.
Shields.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Knaptrab.
Aye.
Murphy.
Yes, aye. Passes 5-0. Last item on the agenda, adoption of proposed resolution that would set transient merchant fee schedule.
So it's pretty self-explanatory. We just passed a transient merchant ordinance and that new ordinance is on an annual basis. We should put it out here. And, so you guys need to decide what type of fee schedule you would like. So currently in the old ordinance, it was $25, just for comparison, $25 per day, $75 per week, or $200 for any number of months. That was the old ordinance. The new ordinance states you guys can adopt via resolution at any point in time. Has changed to an annual license. So I had suggested 100. I had done some research around the state of Michigan, just for quick reference. Cadillac had $100 initial fee and then a $50 annual fee thereafter. Holland is $50 per day. Charlevoix is $255 per season. East Jordan said $200. Harbor Springs, little bit of a, based on 2 days, basically $800 for a non-local plus an additional $50 per day. If you were local, it was $100. Traverse City, $50 per month, in residential areas, and then it goes up to $100 per week based on a time period, or $100 per day during the busy summer season in commercial areas. So as I mentioned a couple meetings ago, we don't have a lot of transient merchants. It is a lot of work, paperwork. It's a lot of hand-holding. I thought $100 was a decent price to start, but open to any comments, questions, suggestions.
I had a question. So is this supposed to be, the fee's supposed to be based on cost, more of a cost base, like how much time it takes to manage it? Or is it supposed to be, so it would seem to me, then if it takes a lot of time hand holding, that we ought to go a little higher than 100.
What groups are being affected by this, Sarah?
Waters Life Festival.
Yeah, we do.
Profits?
I mean, it's anyone that's not exempt from the ordinance. So a lot of people that call are exempt because they make their own, produce their own items. They are part of the farmer's market. They are part of the art in the park. So it's a limited number of people, but as I did mention in the past, we have, since Water is Life has started the event in the city and we're allowing them to use our facilities. There are a handful that do come out of that group of 30 vendors. This year, I think I did 3. But it's a lot of paperwork that they have to submit, and it's not just Water is Life, it goes to anyone that would request to sell private or public land. So,
Mr. Moore.
I'm certainly open to everybody's perspective, but when I listened, very cursory, listening to that list, it did seem like this was on the low end of what is happening in other communities. So I tend to agree with Mr. Nachtrab on this and welcome listening to others.
Mr. Shields.
I would say I support the $100 recommendation from Clerk Beck.
Ms. Walker.
I agree. I would support what the city clerk is recommending.
Do I have a motion? Oh, you guys all said it.
I'll be happy to make a motion, Mayor, to adopt the proposed resolution setting the transient merchant fee schedule to a $100 annual fee.
I'll second the motion.
Motion from Ms. Walker, second from Mr. Shields. Other discussion on this, council? There being none, public wish to weigh in on this? There being none, I go to Ms. Beck for roll.
Walker,
Aye.
Shields,
Aye.
Demore,
Aye.
Nachtrab,
Aye.
Murphy.
Yepper, yes. Now,
Can I just make a brief postscript? Again, I would say, Ms. Beck, if you find that, you know, as this rolls out, that doesn't accurately reflect your time commitment, et cetera, I would ask that you let us know, please.
yes.
Thank
Now I'm gonna go to city council comment, and I'll go to Mr. Knobtraub, Ward 3 first.
Oh, I almost forgot. Yes, I wanted to follow up on the homeless, joint session. We haven't had a lot of discussion that I'm aware of, in fact, no discussion since that meeting. And I was just wondering where we're going with this. Is this something that the city manager is gonna follow up with? Or are we supposed to be talking about it as a group? Because I feel like because I know in that meeting, my mind changed a lot from the beginning of this session, the subject to now. And I just don't know, what are we doing?
What do you have an idea of what you would like to bring up?
What I'd love to do is to be able to have a discussion amongst us as to what we heard and what do we now think our role is, if any. I have been very adamant that it's a public safety issue. And I told you guys before, it was my first call from somebody wasn't a pleasant conversation with this young lady. And so the public safety is a big deal to me.
How about this? How about if we put it on, I put it on the agenda for the next meeting, that we have a discussion of a summary of where we go from here as a group.
That would be fantastic, Mayor.
Shane got her. Anything else, Mr. Knobtraub?
No, sir.
Ms. Walker, Ward 4.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, we are 2 weeks away from our annual election. So both myself, Ward 4 and Ward 2 have 2 candidates unopposed. And if
And
I'm
3.
correct, Sarah, and Ward 3 has a new candidate. So it feels like I feel a little remiss that we're like wasting city resources to go through an election that's uncontested. But I guess that's how the democratic process works. And that's how this council has decided to move forward with every 3-year elections alternating, because the original schedule was all the odd year or the even years were the general election years. And it was kind of unfair to Ward 1 and Ward 3. So here we are, and November the 4th, Tuesday, November the 4th is election day. So I look forward to turning out my neighbors and residents to come out and vote for myself and Ward 2 and Ward 3.
Thank you. Mr. Shields?
Thanks, Mayor. In light of moving forward on the parking zoning changes for eating and drinking establishments, and I'm glad that this has moved on the way it did. That discussion will, as I'm understanding and accepting, will be in 2026. So I'm not here. I'm going to go ahead and read this statement. When considering regulating parking, we need to remember that on-street parking is public space, not private property, and it's meant to serve the public good, not only adjacent homeowners. I understand the dislike for spillover of parking into residential areas, but recognize that community life means sharing space, not freezing it in time. And if we want communities that are walkable, diverse, and full of vibrancy, we have to accept that shared public space will sometimes be busy. That's not decline, that's a healthy community navigating forward motion and one that is not stagnant. It is council members' responsibility to examine impacts to individuals and to the entire community's well-being. And when we rely on minimums, we're forcing every developer, restaurant, or apartment to potentially overbuild parking, which has several potential negative consequences, such as wasted space that could have been put to more productive use, reinforces car dependency, economic impacts such as reduced tax base and higher development costs that get passed on to tenants or customers, and creates barriers for small business owners, small developers that potentially kills projects. We can manage parking thoughtfully without mandating minimum parking, which is a blunt instrument. Rather, we can look at strategic time limits, residential and employee parking permits or tags, and shared parking agreements. Ann Arbor, the city of Ann Arbor eliminated off-street parking minimums in 2022. Their residents and city officials that supported this noted that removing the minimum parking requirement should lower costs in new development by reducing mandatory parking construction, which is expensive, thereby making housing or commercial space more affordable and giving developers greater flexibility. That was in 2022, and the data to support whether that is carrying out is still yet to be determined. Thank you.
Mr. Moore.
So given the abundant attendance this evening, it would have been easy to miss that there were 2 Petoskey Youth Advisory Council members in attendance. Just let everybody know that the council decided henceforward to have at least 1, if not 2 representatives at every city council meeting, so they can take back to their colleagues on the council what happens at the meeting and issues of interest and concern to them. And their approach will be to share that information, and then should the council as a whole vote to provide some impact to us on a particular issue, they will do so at the next meeting. So thank you very much.
I want to say thank you to all those even though they aren't here, no longer here. Thank you for participating and seeing what's going on the trail. It means that we have an active community, we have a vibrant community, we have an alive community. We have people that care and are passionate about it, as all of us and the staff especially. Thank you to the staff for all you did on this project, to getting this stuff ready for Rory and Baird. So no further, did you have something you want to, please?
Quick reminder, sorry. Next Monday, we'll have our training session with MML. I believe at last count, we have about 38 board and commission members that have signed up. We'll provide a light dinner and get trained up next Monday, as well as a reminder of our next regular meeting will be pushed back. Really appreciate your grace on moving the next meeting, which would, instead of Tuesday the 3rd, would be Thursday the 6th of November. So thank you for that consideration.
Yes, thank you.
To be no further business to come before this council, I call this meeting adjourned. Have a good evening. I will say